I know.
Okay.
By all means, feel free. Also, when I get done doing your intro, I grab you guys water if you need some.
Yeah, great.
Hey, Amber. Amber. Amber Alicia. Thank you. All right. Getting ready to read from Jamel's book. Whoop. Okay, I'll just talk into this one since I turned it on. Welcome, folks. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us, both to my virtual friends as well as to those of us who are in person. This is Kimbilio and Left Bank Books presenting the Kimbilio for Black Fiction Reading Series. Tonight's authors are National Book Award finalist. I don't know why that sounds so dramatic. National Book Award finalist, Jamel Brinkley, and Kimbilio National Fiction Prize Award winner, Mary McLaughlin Slechta. Thank you. I'm only going to get it right once. They will both be in discussion with each other, discussing their new books. Jamel's new book, Witness, is described as an elegant, stirring, and insistent new book bearing out actions taken and not taken. And Slechta's new book, Mulberry Street Stories, is described as an electric and eclectic collection. Real quick, tonight's event is made possible because of your incredibly generous support. When you shop at Left Bank Books, your money goes directly into the local economy. As I like to say all the time, it keeps the bookstore open, streets paved, libraries open, booksellers fed. So we really do thank you for being here tonight. My name is Danielle King. I'm our general manager and some other stuff here at Left Bank Books. I get the joy and privilege of helping our phenomenal event coordinator, Shane Mullen, to produce the hundreds of author events we do each year with our fantastic team here in St. Louis. And we are so delighted to be doing in-person events. Please feel free to check out our event calendar for my friends in the store. When you leave, grab a bookmark. There's a QR code on the back. We will talk you through it if that is uncomfortable. I am uncomfortable with that, so it will not be me, but all right. And now for tonight's authors. Very quickly, Jamel is the author of A Lucky Man, which won the Ernest J. Gaines Award for Literary Excellence and was a finalist for the National Book Award, the John Leonard Prize, and the Hurston Wright Legacy Award. If that resume is not impressive enough, his work has also appeared in the Paris Review, A Public Sphere, Plowshares, and the Best American Short Stories. He was raised in the Bronx and Brooklyn and currently teaches at the Iowa Writers Workshop. Mary grew up in a tiny world carved out of New England by Southern African Americans and Jamaicans. This is a great bio. I didn't even write this. This is great. She's the author of The Spoonmaker's Diamond and a poetry collection, Wreckage on a Watery Moon. Her work appears in journals and anthologies, including Mom Egg Review, Rattle, and Black Lives Have Always Mattered, and is forthcoming in Jelly Bucket and Best Small Fictions. A Pushcart nominee, recipient of the Charlotte and Isidore Paiwanski Prize from the Caribbean Writer, and two-time poet in residence at the Chautauqua.
Perfect.
God, you're very kind. Institution. She is a Kimbilio Fellow and editor with great weather for media after a long career in education, and we always thank our teachers. So, on behalf of Left Bank Books and Kimbilio, please help me give a warm welcome to Jamel and Mary. This one should also work perfectly. I'll grab you guys this water. So I should. You may do whatever you like. This is your party.
Well, since I can do whatever I like, I'd love to sing. I really wanted to be a singer before I wanted to be a writer, but I won't, and you won't have to endure that. So the first story I want to read kind of sets the stage for where Mulberry Street is and what it means to the people who live there. A house on Mulberry Street. Even before Dessa's father pulled the fish fully out of the water, he was telling her about luck and being lucky, all because he had caught a carp, long and silvery wonderful in the sunlight. "It's too big for the bucket," he shouted, running to the truck for a knife to scale and gut it on the spot. He told her to mind the fish didn't get away. That was easier said than done, for a lucky fish is a wily one. As soon as he was gone, it wheezed and spit and found its proper voice. Little girl, it said, your father has promised you one of my scales for luck. I offer you much more if you let me go. Tessa's head came closer, the better to hear, but her feet stayed back. Don't be afraid, it said. Your father's a small man compared to the fine woman you are meant to be. Tip over the bucket so I can return to the lake, then refill it and tell him the fish flew away. He won't believe me. But when the carp promised her 3 wishes, she did as she was told. The lie was useless. Her father hit her hard enough to make her ears ring. There went my lucky groan, gray days and cold nights ahead, empty bellies, an early grave for your mother, the jailhouse for me, and bad teeth all around. The house will burn to the ground, and your grandmother will return from the dead and tell where I buried her money in the yard. He raised his hand to hit her again. I wish you wouldn't, Tessa sobbed. Finding his hand frozen mid-air, he swung a leg to kick her, and again she sobbed. I wish you wouldn't. So there he stood, trying to balance on one foot when the cart rose from the water, thick as an elephant and long as the road that runs from the city into the country. It did indeed have wings. Poor Dessa, it exclaimed. You've wasted 2 wishes on a fool. What will you wish for now? For me, snapped the fisherman. She'll wish me back to the man I was. Dessa shivered at the thought and said, I wish. Yes, said the carp. Quickly, said her father. I wish for a house on Mulberry Street. Now who's the fool? Her father, laughing bitterly, tumbled into the reeds where you'll find him still. As for a house on Mulberry Street, it's a fine wish. The houses are sturdy as castles, and the neighbors who walk about as kings and queens will deign to push you out of the snowbanks and bring you pie. And if you've been housebound, bellow a Happy New Year well into spring, and in June, honk at you and your friends in your caps and gowns. Good people, the best. Oh, to be loved like that. Dessa, her mother and grandmother, lived there happily for many years. Okay, so on Mulberry Street, and there was a house at the bottom of the hill, an abandoned house. Sparrow. Juanetta had passed the abandoned house since 3rd grade and paid it no mind. She didn't pass close because now that she was in high school, she walked in the street. But one afternoon when the street was freshly tarred, she was hurrying beside the hedge along the property, without warning, pitched forward and vomited. She ducked into the yard to think. Her sister had a baby at 14 and it looked like she was following in those footsteps. Mama never said none of y'all girls worth a damn, but inside her head, Juanetta heard those words in her mother's voice. As she cried on the stoop of the house, hidden from passersby, she noticed a flurry of activity inside the hedge. She had the feeling of being watched, and sure enough, at the end of the yard, a sparrow tilted its head from the branch of a mulberry tree. Slipping sunflower seeds from her book bag, she scattered them across the hard-packed earth and waited for the sparrow to come down. It hopped closer, closer. Just as she might touch it, it gave a loud cry and a flock rose from the hedge, snapping like a sheep. It dropped so quickly she lost sight of her sparrow among the dozens. But when the last husk was turned over, the bold sparrow rose first. With a full throat, it led the flock back to the hedge. When she checked, there wasn't a sparrow to be found, but along the hedge, fresh hoed earth sprinkled with green shoots. Like beans, she thought, germinating in a Dixie cup on the windowsill at school. Alive. In the time it took to retrieve her bag, the shoots had sprung into a row of collard greens, and in a blink of an eye they were silver with frost. Perfect. I could practically smell them cooking down with a turkey wing, thought Juanetta, her mouth watering. But when she tried to pick them, her chest tightened with fear. What had the science teacher said about eating vegetables grown in the city soil? There were bad chemicals in the air and water, lead from the cars, poison. She stared at the greens, hungry, unsure what to do when a long, clear cry came from the mulberry tree. Gathering up the greens, she hurried away. There was nobody home. She cleaned the sink, then rinsed and inspected each leaf like she'd been doing it her whole life. She jumped when the pot buckled with heat and tossed in garlic and onion before the oil burned. Then leaves. Mama was overcome. Lord, if I don't smell greens, and how they fresh too. But then she stirred the pot and frowned. Why didn't you use the turkey wings? Juanetta had no answer for why she changed her mind or how she'd known about the iron skillet. Mama's lip curled. That old spider gonna leave a rusty taste. But Juanetta turned the cornbread out on the counter and it tasted fine. She explained how she wiped the skillet clean with oil and kept it in a hot oven. Mama fixed herself some of everything. Who you ever seen do that? Again, Winetta had no answer, and Mama didn't speak more, though she hummed a good deal. Winetta decided to put off telling her about the other business. The next afternoon, she didn't hear a peep from the hedge. When she checked the other side, the soil was ash-colored and stingy as the rest of the yard. Nothing growing but food wrappers. She rubbed her belly and sat eating sunflower seeds. Soon she felt eyes watching, and there it was, the bold sparrow in the tree. It summoned the flock to Winetta's scattered seeds, then led them back. When she checked, there were no birds, but once more green shoots growing in dark, loose soil. She blinked, and a row of tomato plants appeared, the plum-shaped fruit glistening like someone had only just watered. She weighed one in her hand like a little heart, wondering if it was safe when the sparrow cried out from the mulberry tree as it had the day before. She picked the whole crop and hurried home. Mama leaned over the sauce, the edges of her hair crinkling from steam. Did you add sugar? Winetta shook her head. Wouldn't a fatty pork chop be nice? But nothing was needed, not even hot sauce. Hungry Mama, thought Winetta, as her mother mopped the pot with the last piece of cornbread. All winter, Winetta fed the sparrow and its flock and found something growing. Even after the snow came, she harvested cucumber, pole beans, corn, celery, and things she didn't have a name for like Romanesco and rutabaga. And every day when she got home, she prepared supper. As the days multiplied into weeks, there was more food than 2 bellies could hold. She read cookbooks from the library, and by Christmas stocked the freezer and put up preserves. Mama didn't say so, but Winetta saw she was glad she didn't have to work all day to come home and have to cook. Glad Mama, hungry Mama. Meal after meal, she licked her fingers, sucked her teeth, never mentioning Winetta's belly. Winetta thought her secret was safe because now they were both fat. But we ain't elephants. One spring day, 8 months from her first hankering for greens, Winetta stepped out of the yard with potatoes and a baby. Fingerlings, she told Mama. They look like their name. Chubby child fingers roasted deep brown in the skillet, skin peeling like wax. Mama eased into the kitchen chair, smiling at them odd taters dressed with pads of butter, and began to eat and eat and eat. Had popped an itsy-bitsy fingerling in her mouth, was polishing off a smidgen of greens into her fork when there was a whimper from Winetta's jacket. You all right, Mama said? Sound like your stomach trying to tell me something. Well, says Winetta, looking for a way to bring up the baby. You know I always be bringing home food. There was a flutter under the jacket. You got something else, says Mama, washing everything down with a glass of cold water. Winetta wasn't sure whose heart was pounding against her chest. Nothing left to eat. It was now or never. She pulled a tiny thing from her jacket, and Mama leaned forward, smacking her lips. You got that today? Yes, Mom, I went to pick up potatoes, and there it was. Mama knew Winetta was lying and decided to teach her a lesson. Well, what you waiting for? Winetta stood up, scared. What you mean? I mean, split it like a chicken. Winetta took a step back. Roll it in flour, fry it up. Winetta clasped the little sparrow to her chest and told the truth. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm just going to read the first few pages of the story. I won't get through the entire thing. The title of the story is Sahar. Oh, it's a cat. Way more interesting.
This is our boss.
Okay, I'll try to focus. Sahar. Gloria had meant to talk to the delivery woman, to truly talk to her. She wanted to say more than just hello and thank you. Maybe introduce herself. Though Sahar must have already known her name, at least for the moment, until the next person in her queue took hold of her mind. Gloria's lips went into motion, but the words came stripped of all sound. In response, Sahar smiled the way people do when they search for their friends in a room crowded with strangers, that pained but hopeful expression of discomfort soon to end. Then she handed over the food Gloria had ordered for dinner, gave a quick wave goodbye, and left the old woman standing there on the threshold between her building and the full onset of spring. After a few cars and loose-limbed pedestrians ambled by, it occurred to Gloria that she should eat her food before it got cold. As expected, there was a handwritten note stapled to the top of the folded paper bag. Gloria shut the door and passed through the old lobby, ignoring the elevator that she hadn't taken in over a year for the exercise, as well as the tarnished mirror above the table where the parcels were left. She climbed the stairs to her floor, the sixth, studying the note as she went. Each sentence was written in a different color, and the first was another inspirational quote by a celebrity. Maybe Sahar had purchased a book of them, or maybe she jotted them down randomly herself. This one in particular was attributed to Superman, but it was obvious Sahar meant the actor who was best known for playing that role. The rest of the note was similar to the others, full of courteous exhortations. Enjoy your meal. Be safe. May your decisions reflect your hopes, not your fears. As usual, she had signed the note, your courier. Whenever Gloria stepped into the apartment, a swell of gratifications washed over her. A new friend visiting for the first time might have called the place small and the furniture old-fashioned, but Gloria preferred to think of it as snug, decorated in a classical style. It fit her as well as a cloche on Josephine Baker's lovely head. In the brief time Gloria had gone to pick up her food, the sunflower in the window had burst, spilling its petals on the floor beneath the sill. She swept them into her palm and put them into a large mason jar, where she also kept pennies, tangles of ribbon, loose beads, and other pleasing slivers of color. She had thought about keeping the notes there too, since she quite liked the hue and quality of the paper, as if Sahar had chosen it with care at a stationery store. But she would end up keeping them between the pages of a volume of poetry by her favorite author. Gloria didn't consider herself much of a writer, certainly not a poet, but she took a lot of pride in being someone who read. Her husband, rest his soul, used to say she did so like a woman wild with lust. In less guarded moments, she would confess that her passionate commitment to reading had sometimes deluded her into thinking she could one day craft a serious sentence or two of her own. The food from this particular restaurant wasn't as good as she had hoped, which was a shame. Based on the enthusiastic reviews online, she'd been looking forward to trying the place, which had opened several months back. But the cubes of chicken were as dry as bones. The saffron rice made overly sweet with too many currants. The bread was supposed to be worthy of headlines, but to Gloria, it was more like yesterday's news. When she was younger, she would have eaten every bite regardless, due to home training. But now, so close to retirement, she was becoming even less concerned with what was considered obligatory or proper. Maurice, her husband, used to say that when he finally retired, no one would be able to tell him a thing. It saddened Gloria that he never made it to the phase of life she was about to enter. She was already experiencing hints of the feeling Maurice had alluded to, and she found that not giving a damn, even in very modest ways, was wonderful. It truly was something else. So not a word could be said to her, not even by her conscience, and she tossed the bad food into the trash. It took her a while to realize she had thrown out Sahar's latest note along with the food. She fished it out of the garbage, but it was badly soiled. She did the best she could to wipe it clean. As she looked at the note again, something, maybe that second glass of white wine she had decided to have with dinner, put her in a fanciful mood. The notion of writing a few words in reply to Sahar became interesting to her. As the darkness of the sky deepened, she sat beside the now empty vase and did exactly that. I'm sorry to say I didn't enjoy the meal you delivered today from that new restaurant, though I did like the other three you brought me in the past month. Of course, the quality of the food from these various places don't have anything to do with you. You've been excellent, you should know, both prompt and cordial, and your notes have been a lovely, special touch. I've tried to show my awareness and my appreciation of that when I tip. I worry when I see how low the default amount is on the app. I bet you come across a lot of cheapskates, rich ones probably, but I firmly believe that good work deserves recognition. I suppose I think that way because of my own life of work. I made up my mind to retire in 1 year. A year, can you believe it? From a job I've had for nearly 40 in the field of hospitality. The room service staff of the Q Hotel. You probably know it. Maybe you've made deliveries there. It isn't so far from where I live. Given how frequently I've seen you, I've never seen any other delivery person from the app more than once. Maybe it isn't far from where you live either. Maybe that doesn't have anything to do with anything. Sometimes I feel like I don't really know how the world works anymore. There are too many wires strewn about, it seems, and every one of them is invisible. But maybe it's better to be blissfully ignorant and avoid getting too tangled up. When the weather is nice the way it has been lately, I often make my way to and from the hotel on foot. You probably know this, but the neighborhood it's in is called something else now, at least by the white people who moved in a minute ago to live the life of Riley. But we still consider it part of our own. It's a good time for me to be getting out of this line of work. I remember when I would bring 50 or 60 glasses of orange juice to people's rooms in the morning. But these days we're lucky if the number of breakfast orders reaches 10. You can imagine what that means for our tips. Some other hotels have gone ahead and eliminated room service entirely. Concierges, bellhops, and doormen too. I guess they figure there's no longer a need when there are tablets and ride shares and when people like you can bring guests a meal from almost anywhere in the city. I know what this sounds like, but don't worry. I'll tell it to you like this, the way I used to tell Maurice, husband, he's dead. It is your fault, but I don't blame you. It drove him a bit crazy whenever I told him that. But all it means is that I understand how people get caught up in things that are much bigger than they are. Things they can't really help. Or here's what I mean. Last year we went on strike with our union. So there we were standing outside, hollering and carrying on, singing our little songs, chanting our little chants. Meanwhile, there's an unending stream of your people pouring into the queue, bags of food in hand. For all I know, you may have been one of them. Were you? Some of my colleagues, I think everyone who labors with others is a colleague. They got steaming mad as they watched the delivery people march in and out of the hotel lobby. I even got jostled a few times, but once I started throwing my elbows around, that calmed down quick. There was no legitimate reason to get upset, as if we didn't know how inadequately your people get paid. As if we couldn't imagine how your people must hope and pray never to fall seriously ill. And I said to Apollo, doorman, prone to righteous anger, as if we didn't all have the same icons of convenience lined up neatly on our phones. Well, here I am, running my mouth, when all I really meant to do was express my gratitude, in a fuller sense than merely sealing a transaction with a robotic word of thanks. Or by calculating 35%. It's strange that you've been my courier 4 times in such a short span. Strange enough that in some way it must be meaningful. But I'm not so foolish as to think I'm the only customer of yours who receives notes. I don't believe I'm special. Everyone deserves good, thoughtful servants. Everyone decent anyway. And it's clear that's what you take time and care to provide. I usually don't have trouble expressing myself in person. In my day, my girlfriends were always impressed by how boldly I made myself known, even to men, Maurice included. But with you, I can barely get out 2 words. They stick in my throat. So I've decided, right this very moment, to hand this silly missive to you the next time we see each other, which, in light of how things have gone, I'm sure will be soon. I hope you read it. And if you do, I hope you won't think I'm Looney Tunes.
Hi, I'm David Haynes. Oh, an actual microphone
Yes, they'll hear you better on the, Is it
on
on?
the screen.
oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I'm waving at the screen.
Yes, yes.
Hi, I'm David Haynes. I'm the board chair of Kimbilio, and we're really proud to be hosting this event tonight, and also really proud to partner with Left Bank Books on our local reading series. Love the store and love being able to be here, bringing the best in African American and diaspora fiction to St. Louis, which is our big part of our mission. I do want to just sort of say 2 things about those of you who'd like to support either organization. First of all, the Left Bank Books Foundation does extraordinary work in the fields of social justice and also in access to literacy, and at the present moment, making sure that books are still going to be a thing. And so, please follow that work and support it where you can. They've been working hard with the legislature to fight all of the various kinds of very pernicious legislation that's taking books out of our schools and libraries. And Kimbilio is doing pretty terrific work as well, developing generations of writers, and we have 2 right up here in front of us, and we have 1 back there. Lindsay Ellis is here with us tonight. Her wonderful book, Bone Broth, is out in the world for a couple of years. So I wanted to start by having Jamel and Mary, both of them Kimbilio Fellows, talk a little bit about sort of the experience of community and writing in community, and just some of those kinds of things.
Yeah, she started.
Oh, no.
Yes.
What was the question again?
The question is really just sort of thinking about community and being a member of a writing community, and how, we're all members of a wide variety of writing communities, and how being a member of the community has informed your work. And both of you actually write a lot about characters who are in very specific communities as well. So,
Well, I'll say that I've been alone for a long time before I met Kimbilio. I didn't know Kimbilio existed. I was a poet and I lived in my community and was happily so, but it's just hard to be out there without having support, which I realized, but I couldn't find quite the support that I needed. I felt like a soul support. So it pretty much saved my life. It sounds melodramatic, but I saved my enthusiasm for being out in the world and to be part of a community. But I'll say that even before I got to Kimbilio, I went in 2019 for the first time. It became almost like a symbol of something that you could attain, and a thing that had never existed. I'm a bit older than Jamel, I think. So I've seen a lot of rejection of Black stories growing up. First of all, I didn't see them when I was a young person, and I really sought them out. And then I struggled to tell them, and it didn't seem like people were particularly interested. My poetry was more narrative, and it was always about my family or about the Black community or something. And there was a misunderstanding of it that I lost, that has gone away since I have met the Kimbilio community. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think I was at Kimbilio in 2014, is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because you hear so much in the writing world about how writing is this solitary act, right? And to a certain extent, that's true. But to a significant extent, it's not true. Like you need community, you need other people. I was just thinking about a book that just came out, I believe, and it's about that collective of Black women writers, like Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, and other folks formed, and how formative that group was. And and that's not just a fact of history. That's living history. That's something that has been going on for a long time, and that spaces like Kimbilio help to reproduce, right? Because it's important. Not only for the well-being of the writer, but also for the good of the work. Your community is also your toughest audience in a lot of ways, right? That's going to help that work be the best that it's going to be. And so I really value those spaces. And I guess the other thing I would say is you mentioned how we both write about very specific communities. And it's hard for me to think about a story without thinking about it with reference to the community or to a community. And I'll just give a quick example and then shut up. But I was, one of the stories in my collection, you could say it takes up the issue of deed theft, which is, I guess, like a new iteration of a very old story of dispossession, like people's homes being taken away from them, tricked into signing away their homes. And I was reading about, all these stories kept cropping up about how this was becoming a phenomenon in Brooklyn, in particular in New York. And, so there's this issue, right, that's happening. But what really struck me was sort of the photographs and the voices of the people who were being affected by this issue. And that's what made me really want to, that's what really got me obsessed with the issue, made me want to kind of find a way to write about it, right? So it wasn't the issue so much that I was writing about, but about the people who were going through such a thing, the communities that are affected by such a thing. And it's through the community that you find your stories, basically. Yeah.
Mary, Mulberry Street is a kind of collage of this community. And so I guess I have two quick questions about it. One is, can you talk a little bit about the challenge, which I was partially there for, of figuring out how to put together a collage of a place, and then maybe just a little bit about the where you got the source of inspiration for this particular place.
I did a lot of meditating about imagination because, as I mentioned before, I'm a very narrative poet, and the truth, the reality, is very difficult to just repeat over and over for me. I'm kind of through with reality. And I know that sounds bizarre, but it's like I just was trying so hard to think of a way to get out of this box of the way things are and the way things repeat over and over and over again. During COVID, when we're all quarantined, I think I did, like most people, go a little bit crazy, but I had a very lucky experience, and that was that I had a friend that I walked with, an African-American woman. I had one Black friend.
It's important to have one.
I had one. But, and an academic, and we would just walk, and there's something, they say about walking and talking and telling stories, and the stories seem to flow, and just having that person, her name is Joan, Dr. Bryan, listen and just nod. It was like, I would think, okay, next time I walk, I'm gonna have a better story for you, Joan. But the stories, so I would tell her a story, and then there would be a piece of that story that I would then kind of run with. To put it together as a collection, I really counted on your help, David, because I wrote kind of a dark version, I think, a dark order of things, and you pulled me to the brighter side, and I'm so glad you did. Because when I started to think about order, what you said, Jamel, about having a community, somebody who can look at something that you've done and say, you know what, you didn't say do it, but think about that order and think about maybe this and maybe the way you're portraying it. That was crucial for me.
Jamel, you've ordered 2 collections now, and so I have 2 questions. One, you know, how, and because they're not necessarily linked in the same kind of way, how does one put together and order a short story collection? Because I may have one. And number 2, how's this experience with Witness different than the experience with Lucky Man in terms of the whole publishing thing?
Oh, okay. Yeah, those are 2 big questions.
Yeah.
The first one, I'll say that the collections came together very differently. When I wrote the stories in my first book, Lucky Man, I wasn't thinking about writing a collection, actually. Over a period of 3 to 5 years, I was drafting stories, and my intention was to learn how to write decent stories, good stories, better than good stories. And, kind of swirling around me were all these very ambitious, goal-oriented people who were talking about their novels and their collections. And they knew they had these book-length things in the works. And I just thought I was, writing these random things that weren't necessarily connected. And it took other people to tell me that they thought I was working on a collection. Again, this is why you need other people, you need community, right? And so at a certain point, I've probably written, I don't know, maybe 13 or so stories. And when I looked at them all together, about 8 or 9 of them talk to each other, which was a lesson for me that, your creative brain, your writing brain is a lot bigger than your conscious brain. And so my mind was sort of making these connections among the stories, even if I didn't think these stories could go together in a book. With Witness, I had the kind of harrowing experience of maybe 3 stories in, seeing the possibility of a collection. And because that didn't happen before, that scared me. I was like, because I thought maybe I was seeing something too soon. And then having seen it too soon, that I would kind of write towards a collection in a way that, it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but I was worried that I would sort of write stories that were all the same or that were limited in some way. But then I realized that the thing that I thought linked the stories that I had written so far was capacious enough to hold a variety of stories. So that, you see, the difference is like, I sort of realized I had a collection retrospectively with the first one, and then with this one, I sort of saw it sooner. And the publication experiences have been, they've been pretty different, because my first book was published with an indie press that's located in Minneapolis, Grey Wolf. Grey Wolf does great work.
Love Grey Wolf.
And so it was very, it's a pretty small operation. I got a chance to go by the office a couple of times for in-person editorial meetings. I was sort of involved in everything from the editing to the cover. I'm more involved with the cover than you would be with a bigger publisher. Events, like I felt like I was really involved, which is great. The issue with the indie press, or the potential issue with the indie press, is that there's not much money there. Just to be frank, some people don't like to talk about the money. We should talk about the money. And so my second book is with a bigger publisher, FSG, which is part of Macmillan. So it's one of the big corporate back publishers. And so the money is different. But there's a little bit more of a small fish in a big pond kind of feeling, if that makes sense. You know, the involvement, this is sometimes more the appearance of involvement, you know, than actual substantive involvement. So it's a trade-off for sure.
And you still have to get out there and do a lot on your own anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, regardless.
Regardless of
Yeah.
size. I think Rabel's offices would probably fit in here, right, in this room.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we fit in this space. So it feels, I mean, you talk again, to come back to this idea of community, you walk into that space and it feels like, oh, this is the publisher.
Yeah.
Yeah. Feel to it.
There are actually books there. Let's see if folks here have questions. We're going to take a little bit more time and then they're going to sign books for us.
I'm just curious how long it took you, each of you, to write your first book.
Really, 2 years, during the time we were all locked up, as I put it, yeah.
I would say those 13 drafts or whatever that I mentioned were probably written over the course of 4 years, 4 to 5 years, somewhere in between there, and then another year of revising on my own before I went into the publication cycle. Yeah.
And then in 2 years editing it, I should add that as well. So, yeah, it was just two alone in my madness, that's all.
Books take a long time.
Yeah.
Did I say that? Was this my sad voice?
Books take a long time.
They're really fun, and they're hard. Other questions about the books, about the experiences of writing the books, about what they're working on now? They didn't ask that one.
I was curious, what are authors that have inspired you, or are there authors that you've looked at?
My answer always changes, but I don't know why I was thinking about this, but Spoon River Anthology was one of my favorite ones when I was a kid. I like the way that those characters talk to each other, and another one I love Shirley Jackson a whole lot. I love that. I love when I discovered that the lottery was just part of a collection, and that you can read it looking for like a little disruptor character in each one of the stories in her collection, so that some people have said there's like a devil in each one. So I love reading that, looking for the devil, and all of her work is very creepy and appealing to me. And so many more. I love to read.
Yeah, I was really struck by the dialogue in which you read and the sounds of it. So I was curious to hear your answer to that. Yeah. What's my answer? You're right, it does change, but I mean, one of my go-to folks is Edward P. Jones, and I know you. I mean, you really opened up one of his stories for me. Which is now one of my favorite stories, actually.
Which one?
Old Boys, Old Girls.
We probably did that.
Mine too.
Yeah. So Edward P. Jones is someone that I return to. I love the idea. I mean, both of his collections really, but The Lost in the City is such an amazing portrait of Black Washington, D.C. I definitely had that in mind because all my books are, kind of firmly set in New York City. And so I kind of, that sensibility is something that really appealed to me. So that's probably tops. But, lots of other books. I love writers like William Trevor, who's a great short story writer. Going back to Dubliners, which influenced Edward P. Jones, so yeah, all the short story, brilliant people, basically.
Both of your writing seems very true and specific in a very good way, but Mary, yours seems more surreal, magical fantasy maybe, though very true, and Jamal, very concrete and real. How do you feel that develops, and can you do both? I mean, you probably maybe wouldn't put both in the same collection, but can you write both ways, or do you feel drawn to kind of veer toward the, extra real versus the nitty gritty?
I've written both ways, and I feel comfortable writing more of a traditional short story that isn't full of magic or something. It's just something that sort of had developed over the last few years. But if I was going to sit down and read a book, I'd sit down and read Witness. I like my taste as a reader. I like stories that take their time, that look at the character and what they're doing. The person who did the judge of this book was so nervous, Carolyn Farrell, and she compared the book to Rattlebone by Maxine Clare, which I have to say I'd never read before. And if you haven't read Maxine Clare, it's a high compliment. I loved it, but I even liked more. Maxine Clare wrote a book, a novella from that, a novel from that collection. She took one of the characters and turned it into a novel called October Sweet. And it sort of reminds me of what you do in your work, is that everything is just looked at so carefully. A person's actions, so like at one point the woman is sewing, she's a teacher and she's making her clothes, and the way she puts the stitches in and the way she thinks about it. I love that kind of writing. I just love to look and to think and to savor like that.
I think I pretty firmly believe that if you sort of patiently observe almost anything, it starts to become strange. It starts to become weird. And that's one way to kind of bridge what might seem like a gap, like I said, I write a lot about New York City, and when I write about the city, so much what I feel like I end up writing about is a certain magic of the city, like the ways that the city is a place that feels to me like it produces coincidences more than other places, and that feels kind of magical. Or you have these sudden eruptions of color or sound or music, and that feels kind of magical to me. And I think if you sort of push, you can get to the surreal or to other things. Like what's interesting about this book actually is that there's a ghost story in here, like a pretty explicit ghost story. And I would argue that there are like two others, more subtle. So I think that what's fascinating for a lot of writers, it's not like we're saying the same thing, is that you can push at the real in such a way that it very quickly it opens up and becomes something else. Yeah.
And I would add that some of the weirdest things that happen in this book actually happened.
Yes.
Okay, so, and one example I love to point to is that there's a house, in the back of this house, this red house, someone has painted a white swastika. And that just seems bizarre, right? In the middle of a city, somebody would do this. But it actually happened, and and then there's another point when there's a truck that looks like Scarlett O'Hara that goes flying around the corner. That actually happened with a Confederate flag off the back. I mean, I live in a small city, and we've seen some things, seen some strange things.
And Mary's stories actually have, some of them are straight up realism, and some of them are, ghosts. I remember when we were talking about how to order the collection, one of my suggestions was, let's break up some of the ghosts.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yeah.
All the ghosts are over in this part. Let's break those ghosts up and kind of sprinkle them around. And one of the things that I'm really interested in that question is, I asked Edward P. Jones about a weird thing that happened in the known world, and this is this sort of weird random thing where people are walking into the state of Texas and they're all different colors and different, there's purple people and green people. And he says, what's that about? The rest of the book is much more realism, because he didn't think there's anything particularly weird about that. And that's also what Garcia Marcus said, that he didn't know what all this stuff about magical realism was. He says, weird stuff happens in South America. So, that was his answer. There's nothing magic about it. Let's call for some questions, and then we're going to set up for book signing back in the back of the room. Daniel's setting us up. Anything else?
What projects are you working on?
Projects you're looking at.
Well, Mulberry Street won't go away, so I'm sorry. I'm back. But I interrupted, what I was really working on was at Kimbilio, a very, very long fairy tale that I'm working on. But I was trying to write about my own life growing up in Connecticut in a rural town. And with all that New England-y stuff. So it's turning into like a grim kind of fairy tale. But I needed a break from it, so this was kind of the little break. Thanks.
All I'll say is that I'm working on a family story. Working on a family story. We'll see what happens. Yeah, I won't say much more than that. 'Cause I'm one of those superstitious people. Yeah.
Follow Kimbilio on our website. We're looking forward to being back here in the winter. Haven't quite figured out who yet, except I know that we're really trying to get my friend Mamie Gauthier here. She's got a new book coming in January. And so we'll have other events coming next year as well. It's so much fun to come and be in the store. I want to thank Jamel and Mary for coming down to St. Louis and sharing their talent with us. And please support our writers by buying their books and Christmas is coming up. The holidays are coming up. Let's make great gifts. Danielle.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, David.
Nothing like authors helping me sell books, really appreciate that. We thank you all so much for coming out. We do have books for sale at the desk. I'm gonna get them set up in the back, and you guys are more than welcome to come back through, give them a couple of seconds, they've been talking a little bit. But then we'll go ahead and get started, okay? Thank you. Thank you.
All right.